What if the picture-perfect marriage you spent your whole life dreaming of crumbled into a nightmare in a single second? What if the charming, wealthy Prince Charming who swept you off your feet was just a mask hiding a violent monster? And what if your only shot at salvation came from a man the whole world fears, a ruthless biker king known as the Devil, fresh off death row with a score to settle? This is the opening chapter of Collision with the Devil, a story of broken vows, dark secrets, and a fateful collision that will rewrite 3 lives forever. Summer had built her whole world around the fairytale. She'd married Elliot, a handsome, successful man who'd courted her with fancy dinners, grand romantic gestures, and a love so intense it felt like destiny. For a year, she lived the life most women only envied, a sprawling mansion, a husband who doted on her, and a future full of promise. She'd walk down the aisle believing he was her soulmate, the man who'd keep every wedding vow, who'd love her through thick and thin. No marriage is perfect, of course. There had been red flags she'd chosen to ignore, sharp, cruel words when he drank too much, a rough shove during a fight, a coldness that would creep into his eyes out of nowhere. But Summer had told herself every couple struggled. She'd promised to love him for better or worse, and she clung to the quiet hope that the bad days were temporary, that they'd work through their problems together. She had no idea how wrong she was. On their first wedding anniversary, that fragile illusion shattered. What was meant to be a quiet night of celebration turned violent when Elliot, drunk and unraveling, struck her across the face with full force. Summer stumbled backward, crashing to the hardwood floor. The wine glass in her hand shattered on impact, shards digging into her palms, deep red wine spilling across the floor like blood. She stared up at her husband in stunned silence, her cheek throbbing, her mind going numb. He'd hit her. The man she'd given her whole heart and whole life to had raised his hand to her. In that one terrible moment, every sweet memory, every whispered promise, every dream of their happily ever after turned to ash. For a split second, Elliot looked as shocked as she felt, like he'd just woken from a horrific nightmare. He dropped to his knees beside her, his face crumpling with guilt and regret, and begged her for forgiveness. He reached out to cradle her face, and Summer flinched away, a sharp spike of terror stabbing through her chest. In that fear, she saw the truth clearly. Their grand mansion wasn't a home. It was a prison. They were completely alone, and no one would hear her if she screamed. "I can't do this anymore," she told him through tears, her palms burning from broken glass. "I have to leave." The words sent Elliot into a desperate spiral of pleading. He swore he'd never meant to hurt her, that the alcohol was to blame. He pulled out his phone on the spot, promising to sign up for AA, to get help, to do anything it took to fix things. He even turned the blame soft and subtle, reminding her that she'd been the one to hand him the champagne glass for their anniversary toast. Then he pulled out the weapon that always worked, their past. He spoke in that smooth, warm voice she'd fallen for, taking her back to their honeymoon, the beach under the stars, her singing off key to a live band, the delicate necklace she'd admired in a crowded market and thought too expensive, the one she still wore around her neck. He'd told her back then that she would never want for anything ever again. He told her she was his whole world, that he'd do anything to get their marriage back to those perfect, happy days. His eyes were earnest, his tone calm, and free of the rage from moments before. For a heartbeat, Summer saw the man she'd married again, the kind, attentive man who'd made her feel loved and safe. When he swore this would never happen again, when he offered to sleep in a hotel that night to give her space, her resolve broke. She chose to believe him. She chose to stay. Because he was her husband. Because a part of her still loved him. That night, she lay alone in their silk sheets, bruised and shaken, clinging to a fragile, foolish hope that things would get better. She had no idea that a storm from her past was already heading her way, one that would blow her whole life apart. It started with a text from her estranged brother, Scorp. They'd barely spoken in months. Scorp had chosen his biker club over their relationship, and Summer had resented him for it. But his message was urgent, desperate. He told her to keep her head down, to stay inside Elliot's mansion for a while. It was serious, he said. Someone was getting out of death row. The evidence had been tampered with. The devil was back on the streets, and he was going to need Scorp's help. Summer's blood turned cold. She had vague, childhood memories of Colt Hudson, the man they called the devil, the infamous president of the Vipers Motorcycle Club, a brutal killer who'd been locked up on death row for 13 years. She'd heard the stories, the violence, the power, the way men would follow him straight into hell. And now he was free. She texted Scorp back, begging him to stay away from Colt, to run before he got himself killed. But her messages went unanswered. Scorp went radio silent, leaving her panicked and furious. Her idiot brother was going to throw his life away for a criminal, and she couldn't just sit by and let it happen. Worse, she couldn't let Elliot find out about her messy, dangerous family history, not when their marriage was already hanging by a thread. Grabbing her keys, she headed straight for Scorp's apartment, determined to talk sense into him before it was too late. Halfway across town, Colt Hudson stepped through the gates of maximum security prison and breathed in his first lungful of free air. In 13 years behind bars had taught him one unshakable truth: there's no point in fearing death when you're not really living. He'd learned young that nothing made a man more feared than taking a life as easily as you'd put out a cigarette on your boot. That first taste of blood had hooked him, same as the first drag of a cigarette. Nothing made a man feel more alive, more powerful, than holding another man's life in the palm of his hand. It had carried him straight to the top of the underworld. As head of the Vipers Mick, he ruled with an iron fist. Every man who pledged to his club pledged his soul, his life, and everything he owned. They all knew betrayal meant death at Colt's hands, and still, they lined up to join. They were all addicted to the life, same as him. Loyalty was the only thing Colt ever valued. It was earned slowly, and given rarely. 13 years ago, he'd made the mistake of giving his trust to the wrong person. That betrayal had landed him on death row, locked away while his club and his empire slipped from his grasp. But now he was free. Free to raise hell. Free to settle old scores. Free to take back everything that was stolen from him. He knew the world had changed in 13 years. He knew not everyone would be happy to see him walk out of that prison alive. He knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed loyal men by his side, and the first face that came to mind was his old friend Scorp. Colt swung his leg over his motorcycle, the engine roaring to life under him, and headed straight for Scorp's place. He had no idea that a beautiful, broken woman was heading there too. A woman running from a marriage of lies, a woman about to walk straight into the path of the devil. He was the monster everyone had warned her about. She was the last thing he ever expected to find. And when their worlds collide, nothing will ever be the same again.